my internet fell on me. No. I was reading so passionately. That was terrible. That was so embarrassing. Oh, anyway, let's get back to reading. Hydration. Give me one moment. Hydration and bio break, real quick. Hello, hello. Sorry, I'm back. There's a internet disconnection right there. It's not just a game, not just a stream, but it's my entire internet basically. My apologies for that, for sure. I mean, even though it's not my fault, but I'm here. All right. Oh God, I got interrupted, so I don't know where did the stream stop. So I'm gonna like look at the pages and maybe go like a few lines back, maybe. Let me see. Hello to all the viewers in my channel. I'm currently reading Natsume Soseki's I Am a Cat, Volume 2, Chapter 4. I'm currently in page 239. Just so you know, we have read that much. And you guys have listened that much. That is amazing. Okay, let's go. I am a dainty cat of candid temperament, and any creature as clinging, poisonous, and vindictive as this tenacious resin is an anathema to me. I cannot stand persons of that kind, and even if one such particular person were the most beautiful cat in the world, let alone a creature loathsome as resin, I still be revolted. It is outrageous that my charmingly pale gray coat can be ruined by a substance whose social and evolutionary status is no higher than that of the gummy muck which streams in the cold north wind from the corners of rickshaw blackies' eyes. Resin ought to realize the impropriety of its nature, but will, of course, do no such thing. Indeed, the very moment my back makes the contact with a pine tree, great clots of resin gather on my fur. To have anything to do with it so insensitive, so inconsiderate a creature would not only be beneath my personal dignity, but would be a defilement to anyone in my coat and lineage. I conclude that, however fleesome I may feel, I have no choice but to grin and bear it. Nonetheless, it is extremely disheartening to find that the two standard means of alleviating my discomfort are both unavailable. Unless I can quickly find some other solution, the irritation in my skin and the thought of gumminess in my mind will bring me to a nervous breakdown. Sinking down in my hind legs into a thinking posture, I had scarcely begun my search for a bright idea. Oops, sorry, I didn't have my books out. There you go. With when an illuminating memory flashed upon me. Every so often my scruffy master saunters off out of the house with a cake of soap and a hand towel. When he returns some 30 or 40 minutes later, his normal dull complexion, while not exactly glowing, has nevertheless acquired a certain modest liveliness. If such expedition can confer a sheen of vitality upon the shabby sloven, what wonders they might work upon myself. It is, of course, true that I am already so extremely handsome that improvements, if possible, are hardly necessary. But if by some misfortune I were to fall sick and perish at this tender age of 1 year old and few odd months, I could never forgive myself for allowing such irremediably irremediable irremed irremediable loss. Oh my god, English is hard. Okay. Irremediable loss to be inflicted upon the populace of the world. I believe that the object of my master's sorties is one of those devices invented by mankind as a mean of easing the tedium of its existence, inasmuch as the public bath. Apologies, I got interrupted. I've locked my door. It's very annoying. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I was muted just now. Sorry. I got interrupted by people, so I muted for a bit, and I'm continuing now. So sorry about that, guys. Sorry. Inasmuch as the public bath is an invention of mankind, it can hardly be as much use to anyone, but clutching as I am at straws, I might as well investigate the matter. If it's as pointless as I anticipate, nothing would be simpler than to drop my inquiries, but I remain unsure whether human beings are sufficiently broad minded to give a cat, a member of another species, even a chance to investigate the efficacy of an institution devised for human purposes. I cannot imagine that I could refuse entry when nobody dreams of questioning the casual comings and goings of my master, but it would be socially most embarrassing to find myself turned from the door. Prudence suggests the wisdom of reconnaissance, and if I like the look of the place, then I can hop in with a hand towel in my mouth. My plan of action formed. I set off for the public bath at a properly leisurely pace. Well, as one turns left around the corner from our side street, one may observe a little further up the road an object like an upended bamboo water pipe puffing thin smoke fumes straight up into the sky. The fuming finger marks on the sides of the public bathhouse. I stole in through its back entrance. That style of entry is usually looked down upon as mean-spirited or cowardly, but such criticisms are merely the tedious grumbles spiced with jealousy that one must expect from persons only capable of gaining access from front doors. It is abundantly clear from the records of history that persons of high intelligence invariably launch attacks both suddenly and from the rear. Furthermore, I note from my study of the making of a gentleman, volume 2, chapter 1, page 5 and 6, that a back door, like a gentleman's last will and testament, provides the mean whereby an individual establishes his true moral excellence. Being a truly 20th century cat, I have had included in my education and more than sufficient of such weighty learning to make it inappropriate for anyone to sneer at my selected mode of entry. Anyways, once I was inside, I found myself immediately left a positive mountain of pine logs cut into 8-inch lengths, and next to it heaped up a hill of coal. Some of my readers may wonder what the subtle significance of my careful distinction between a mountain of logs and a mere hill of coal is. There is, in fact, no subtle significance whatsoever. I simply use the two words hill and mountain as they should correctly be used. Far from having to think about literary niceties, I am overwhelmed with pity for the human race which, having regularly dieted on such revolting objects such as rice, birds, fish, and even animals, is now apparently reduced to munching lumps of coals. Right in front of me, I see an open entrance about 6 feet wide. I peep through and find everything dead quiet, but from somewhere beyond there comes a lively buzz of human voices, and I deduce that the bath must be where the sound originates. I move forward between the wood pile and the coal heap, turn left and find a glazed window to my right. On the ledge below, a considerable number of small round tubs is piled up into a pyramid. My heart goes out to them. For it must be painfully contrary to a rounding concept of reality to be constricted within a triangular world. To the south of this pile, the seal juts out for a few feet, with, as if to welcome me, wooden boarding on it. Since the boarding is roughly 3 feet up from the ground, it is, from my point of view, an ideal hopping height. All right, I say to myself, and as I flew up nimbly to the board, the public bath, like something dangled suddenly beneath, appeared beneath my very nose. There is nothing in the world more pleasant than to eat something one has never eaten, or to see something one has never seen before. If my readers, like my master, spend 30 or 40 minutes on 3 days of every passing week in the world of the public bath, then, of course, that the world can offer them few surprises. But if you are like me, they have never seen that spectacle. They should make themselves immediate arrangements to do so. Don't worry about the deathbeds of your parents, but at all costs do not miss the grand show of the public bath. The world is wide, but in my opinion, it has no sight more startlingly remarkable to offer. Wherein, you ask, resides its crass spectacularity. Well, it is so variously spectacular that I hesitate to particularize. First of all, the human beings vociferously swarming about beyond the window glass are all stark naked, as totally unclothed as forms and aborigines, primeval Adams still prancing about in this 20th century. I am moved by so much nudity to preface my comments with a history of clothing, but it would take so long that I will spare my readers any rehash of the learned observation of Herr Dr. Diogenes in his monumental study of subjects, and simply refer them to slightly less learned commentary on that work, Mr. Thomas Carlyle's Sartor Resartus. The essential fact remains that the clothes are the man, and the ungarbed man is nothing. Skipping centuries of sartorial civilization, indeed, a tautological phrase, but I would remind my readers that Beau Nash, in the heyday of his social regulations of 18th century Bath, a royally patronized hot spring spa in the West England, established the inflexible rule that men and women submerging themselves in those salutary waters should nevertheless be clothed from their shoulders down to their feet. A further relevant incident occurred again in a certain English city just after the midpoint of the 19th century. It so happened that this city has then founded a school of art, and quite naturally, the school's function involved the presence and display of various studies, drawings, paintings, models, and the statues of the naked human figures. But the inauguration of this school placed both its own staff and the city fathers in a deeply embarrassing situation. There could be no question but the leading ladies of the city must be invited to the opening ceremony. Unfortunately, all civilized women of females of that era were unshakably sure that human beings are clothed animals having no relationship whatsoever, let alone blood kinship, and the skin-clad apes. A man without his clothes, they knew it for a fact, was like an elephant shorn of its trunk, a school without students, soldiers devoid of courage. Anyone without the other of these pairs would be so totally decharacterized as to become, if not complete non-entity, at least an entity of a baseless transubstantiated nature. A man so A man so transubstantiated would be, at best, a beast. The ladies, as the saying is, laid it on the line. For us to consort with such beast humans, even though those bestialities were only present in the form of drawings and statues, would compromise our honor. If they are to be present at the ceremony, we will not attend. The school authorities thought that the ladies were all being a little silly, but in the West, as in the East, women, however physically unfit for the hard slog of pounding rice or slashing on about the battlefield, are indispensable ornamental features of any opening ceremony. What then could be done? The school authorities took themselves off to the draper's shop, bought 35 and 78 rolls of suitable black material, and clothed their beastly prints, their less than human statues, in 100 yards of humanizing huckaback, lest any lady's modesty might be outraged accidentally. They even masked the faces of their statues in swathes of sable scarf. European marbles and Hellenic plasters, thus yashmak out of animal kingdom. I am happy to record that the ceremony went off to the complete satisfaction of all concerned. From those remarkable accounts, the importance of clothes to mankind may be deduced, but very recently there has been a swing in the opposite direction. People may now be found who go about incessantly advocating nudity, praising nude pictures, and generally making a naked menace of themselves. I think they are in error. Indeed, since I have now remained decently clothed from the moment of my birth, how could I think otherwise? The craze for the nude began when at the Renaissance, sorry, at the Renaissance, the traditional customs of the ancient Greeks and Romans were popularized for their own lewd ends by the Italianate promoters of the cultural rebirth. The ancient Greeks and Romans were culturally accustomed to nudity, and it is highly unlikely that they recognized any connection between nakedness and the public morality. But in the northern Europe, the prevailing climate is cold. One moment, please. Even in Japan, there is a saying, one cannot travel naked. So that by natural law in Germany or England, a naked man is very soon a dead one. Since dying is daft, northerners wear clothes. And when everyone wears clothes, human beings become clothes animals. And having once become clothes animals, they are unable to conceive that naked animals whom they may happen to run across could possibly be human. Its absence of clobber immediately identifies its brutish nature. Consequently, it is understandable that Europeans, especially Northern Europeans, might regard nude pictures and nude statues as essential bestial. In other words, Europeans and Japanese have this good sense to recognize nudes and representations of nudity as life forms inferior to cats. But nudes are beautiful, you say? What of it? Beasts, though beautiful, are beasts. Some of my more knowledgeable readers seeking to catch me in an inconsistency may possibly ask whether I have ever seen a European lady in evening dress. Inevitably, being only a cat, I have never had that honor. But I am reliably advised that Western ladies in formal evening wear do in fact expose their shoulders, arms, and even breasts, which is, of course, disgusting. Before Renaissance times, women's dress style did not sink to such scandalous levels, to such ridiculous deco- décolletage. Since at all times women wore the clothes one would normally expect on any human being, why then have they transformed themselves to look like vulgar acrobats? It would be too far wearisome to set out the dreary history of the decadence. Let it suffice that those who know the reasons know them, and those who don't need to. In any event, whatever the historical background, the fact remained that modern women each and every night trick themselves out in virtual undress and evince in the deepest self satisfaction with their bizarre appearances. However, it would seem that somewhere underneath, under the beastly brazenness, they retain spark of feelings. Sorry, oh my god, I'm so distracted today. I'm sorry. A quick moment. Okay, sorry, I'm back. However, it would seem that somewhere under the beastly brazenness they retain some spark of human feeling, because as soon as the sun comes up, they cover their shoulders, sleeve their arms, and tuck away their breasts. It is all more odd in that not only do they sheath themselves by day to the point of near invisibility, but they carry their lunacy to the extreme of considering it extremely disgraceful to expose so much as a single daily toenail to the public view. Such inane contrariety surely prove that women's evening dresses are the brainchild of some gibbering conference of brain damaged freaks. If women resent that logic, why don't they try walking about in daytime with bared shoulders, arms, and breasts? The same type of enquiry should also be addressed to nudists. If they are so besotted with the nude, why don't they strip their daughters? And why, while they are about it, don't they and their families stroll around Ueno Park in no more than nakedness that they so affect to love? It can't be done, they say. But of course it can. The only reason why they hesitate is not, I bet, because it can't be done, but simply because Europeans don't do it. The proof of my point is in their dusk behavior. There they are, swaggering down in the Imperial Hotel, all dolled up in those crazy evening dresses. What origin and history do cock-eyed costumes have? Nothing indigenous. Our bird-brained ladies flaunt themselves in goose-skin flesh and feathers solely because that is made in Europe. Europeans are powerful, so it matters not how ridiculous or daft their going-ons. Everyone must imitate even their daftest designs. Yield to the long and trim down, yield to the powerful and be humbled, yield to the weighty and be squashed. Prudence demands such degree of yielding, but surely only dullards yield all along the line. Surely only chimpanzees ape everything they see. If my readers answer that they can't help being dullards, can't help being born without the ability to ability to discriminate and imitation, then of course I pardon them. But in that case, they must abandon all pretense that the Japanese are a great nation. I might add that all my foregoing comments apply with equal force in the field of academic studies, but I am here only concerned with questions of clothing. I will now press the scholastic parallels. I think I have established the importance of their clothes to human beings. Indeed, their clothing is so demonstrably all important to them that one may reasonably wonder whether human beings are clothes or clothes are the current acme of the evolutionary process. I am tempted to suggest that human history is not the history of flesh and bone and blood, but a mere chronicle of costumes. Things have indeed come to a pretty pass when the naked man is seen, not as a man, but as a monster. If, by mutual agreement, all men were to become monsters, obviously none would see anything monstrous in the others, which would be a happy situation were it not that men would be unhappy with it. When mankind first appeared upon earth, a benign nature manufactured them to standard specification, and all equally naked and were pitched forth into the world. Had mankind had been created with an inborn readiness to be content with equality, I cannot see why, born naked, they should have been discontent to live and dig and die unclothed. However, one of the primeval nudists seems to have communed with himself along the following lines: since I and all my fellow men are indistinguishably alike, what is the point of effort? However hard I strive, I cannot of myself climb beyond that common rut. So, since I yearn to be conspicuous, I think I drape myself in something that will draw the eyes and blow the minds of the clones around me. I would guess that he thought and thought for at least 10 years before he came up with the stupendous idea, that glory of a man's inventiveness, pants. He put them on at once and puffed up the pride and primordial pompousness paraded about among his startled fellows. From him descend today's quaint clouted rickshaw man. It seems a little strange to have taken 10 long years to think up something so simple as a brief, as shorts, but the strangeness is only a kind of optical illusion created by time immensely long perspective. In the days of man's remote antiquity, no such breathtaking inventions such as pans had ever been achieved. I heard that it took Descartes, no intellectual slouch, a full 10 years to arrive at his famous conclusion, obvious surely to any 3-year-old, that I think, that therefore I am. Since original thought is thus demonstrably difficult, perhaps one should concede that it was an intellectual feat, even if it took 10 years for the wits of proto-rickshaw-man to formulate the notion of knickers. In any event, ennobled by their knickers, the breed of rickshawmen became the lords of creation and stalked the highways of the world with such overweening pride that some of the most spirited among the cloudless monsters were provoked into competition. Judging by its uselessness, I would suggest they spend mere 6 years in planning their particular invention, the good-for-nothing surcoat. The knicker's glory faded, and the golden age of surcoats shone upon the world, and from those innovators are descended all the greengrocers, chemists, drapers, and haberdashers of today. When twilight fell, first upon knickers and then surcoats, then came down the Japanese skirted trousers. That these were designed by monsters peeved by the surcoat boom, and the descendants of their inventors include both warriors of medieval times and all contemporary government officials. The plain, if regrettable, in fact that all the originally naked monsters strove vaingloriously to outdo each other in the novelty and weirdness of their gear, the ultimate grosserie has only recently appeared in swallowtail jacket. Yet, if one ponders the history of these quaint manifestations, one recognizes that there is nothing random in their occurrence. The development was neither haphazard nor aimless. On the contrary, it is man's deathless eagerness to compete, the driving stretch of his intrepid spirit, his resolute determination to outdo all members of his species, which has guided the production of successive styles of clothing. A member of this species does not go around shouting aloud that he or she differs himself or herself from other of the species. Instead, each one goes about wearing different clothes. From this observed behavior, a major psychological truth about this race of folk destroyers may be deduced: that just as nature abhors a vacuum, man abhors equality. Being thus psychologically determined, they now have no choice whatsoever but to continue enveloping themselves in clothes, and would regard a deprivation thereof with as much alarm as they would face as cutting off a flesh or the removal of bones. To them, 1 second, please. I'm so sorry, guys. So sorry. Today is weird. I keep getting interrupted by people. I keep getting internet issue, and then I got phone call and all that. It's so weird. I'm so sorry. I tried my best. I'm sorry. I'm gonna continue now. Okay, sorry. A quick hydration. Oh, thank you. So sorry. It's not fun when like you're reading and then like if I get interrupted, that's fine. Like you guys as listeners get interrupted, that's very annoying. So I don't really want to like. It's okay. Where did I stop? 1 second, please. Sorry, I'm trying to find where I stopped. Yet, if one ponders the history of this quaint manifestation, one recognizes that there is nothing random in their occurrence. The development was neither haphazard nor aimless. On the contrary, it is man's deathless eagerness to compete, the driving stretch of his intrepid spirit, his resolute determination to outdo all the other members of his species, which guided the production of successive styles of clothing. A member of this species does not go around shouting aloud that he or she differs in himself or herself, but others of the species. Instead, each one goes about wearing different clothing. From this observed behavior, a major psychological truth about this race is forked destroyers may be deduced that just as nature abhors a vacuum, mankind abhors equality. Being thus psychologically determined, they now have no choice whatsoever but to continue enveloping themselves in clothes, and would regard a deprivation thereof with as much alarm as they would face a cutting of a flesh or removal of a bone. To them it would be absolute madness to cast their various clouds, a ripping away of the essential human substance, and unthinkable to attempt to return to their original condition of equality, even if they could bear the shame of being accounted lunatics. It would not be feasible to return to a state of nature in which, by all civilized standards, they would be automatically become not merely lunatics but monsters, even if all the billions of human inhabitants of this globe could be rehabilitated as monsters, even if they were purged of their shame by total reassurance that since all were monsters, none were monsters. Believe you me, it still would do no good. The very next day, the reign of equality among monsters had been re-established, and the monsters would be at it once again. If they cannot compete with their clothes on, then they will compete as monsters. With every man Jack stark staring naked, they would begin to differentiate between degrees of staring starkness, for which reason alone it would, I think, be best if clothes were not abandoned. It is consequently incredible that the assorted human creatures now displayed before my very eyes should have taken off their clothes, surcoats, skirted trousers, even the smallest small things from which their owners would as soon be parted from their guts and bladders, are all stacked up on shelves, while the recreated monsters are, with complete composure, even chatting, scandalously exposing their archetypal nudity to the public view. Are you surprised, then, gentle readers, that some time back I described this scene as genuinely spectacular. Shocked as I was and am, it will be my honor to record for the benefit of all truly civilized gentlemen as much as I can of this ordinary sight. I must start by confessing that, faced by such mind boggling chaos, I don't know how to start describing it. The monsters show no method in their madness, and it consequently is difficult to systemize analysis thereof. Of course, I can't be sure that it's actually a bath, but I make the wild surmise that it cannot be anything else. It is about 3 feet wide and 9 feet long, and is divided by an upright board into two sections. One section contains white colored bath water. I understand that this is what they call the medicated bath. It has a turbid look, as if lime has been dissolved in it. Actually, it looks not only turbid with lime, but also heavily charged and scum with grease. It's hardly a wonder that it looks so whitely stale, for I'm told the water is changed but once a week. The other section comprises the ordinary bath, but here again, by no stretch of the imagination could its water be described as crystal clear or pellucid. It has the peculiarly repulsive color of stirred rain water, against the danger of fire, has stood for months in a rain tank on a public street. Next, though the effort kills me, I will describe the monsters themselves. I see two youngsters standing beside the tank of dirty water. They stand facing each other and pouring pail after pail of hot water over each other's bellies, which certainly seems a worthwhile occupation. The two men are faultless developed, so far as the sunburnt blackness of their skin is concerned. As I watch them, thinking that these monsters have remarkably sturdy figures, one of them, pawing at his chest with a hand towel, suddenly speaks to the other. "Keen, old man, I've got a pain right here. I wonder what it is." "That's your stomach. Stomach pains can kill you. You better watch it carefully," is Kin's most earnest advice. "But it's here, on my left," said the first one, pointing to his left lung. "Sure, there's your stomach. On the left, the stomach; on the right is the lung." "Really? I thought the stomach was about here." And this time he taps himself lightly on the hip. "Don't be silly, that's the lumbar," Kin mockingly replies. At this point, a man about 25 or 26, sporting a thin moustache, jumps into the bath with a plop. Next minute, the soap and loosened dirt upon his body rose to the surface, and the water glintingly rich as if it might be mined for mineral wealth. Right beside him, a bald-headed old man is taking to some loose, close-cropped crony. Only their heads are visible above the water. Nothing's much, much Nothing's much fun anymore when you get to be old like me. Once get the decrepit, one cannot keep up with the youngsters. But when it comes to hot bath, even though they say that only lads can take real heat, that for me must still be really hot. Otherwise, the old man boastfully observed, I don't feel right. But you, sir, are in spanking health. Not bad at all to be as energetic as you are. I'm not at all that energetic. I only manage to keep free from illness. A man, they say, should live to be 120, provided he does nothing bad. What? Does one live as long as that? Of course. I guarantee it up to 120. In these days, before the restoration, there was a family called Magaribuchi. They were personal retainers of the shogun. They used to live up here in Tokyo at Ushigome, and one of their male servants lived up to 130. That's a remarkable age. Yes, indeed. He was in fact so old that he had clean forgotten his age. He told me he could remember it until he turned 100, but then he just lost count. Anyway, when I knew him, he was 130 and still going strong. I don't know what's become of him. For all I know, he may be out there still alive, kicking and kicking. So saying, he emerges from the bath. His whiskered friend remained in the water, grinning to himself, scattering all around him suds that glittered like small flecks of mica. The man who thereupon got into the bath was certainly no ordinary monster, for all across his back was a spread vast of tattoo. It seemed to represent that legendary hero, Iwami Jutaro, about to decapitate a python with a huge high brandished sword. For some sad reason, the tattoo has not been completed, and the python must be guessed at. The great Jutaro looks a mite discomfited as this illustrated man jumped into the water. Much too tepid, he remarked. The man entering immediately behind him seems disposed to agree. Oh dear, he says, they ought to heat it up a bit. Just the same, his features crack into a strained grimace, as though the water were in fact too hot for him. Finding himself right next to the tattooed monster. "Hello, Chief!" he greets him. The tattooed monster nodded, and after a while enquired, "How is Mr. Tami?" "Couldn't say. He's gone so potty about gambling." "Not just gambling." "So? There's something wrong with that one. He's always bloody minded. I don't know, but no one really likes him. Can't quite put a finger on it. Somehow one cannot quite trust him. A man with a trade just couldn't be like that." "Exactly. Mr. Tami is rather too pleased with himself. Too damn stuck up, I would say. That's why folks don't trust him, wouldn't you say?" "You're right. He thinks he's in a class by himself, which never pays. All the old craftsmen around here are dying off. The only ones left are you, Mr. Moto the cooper, the master brickmaker. That's about it. Of course, as you know, I too was born in these parts, but just take Mr. Tami. Nobody knows where he sprang from. True. It's no wonder that he come as far as he has. Indeed, somehow nobody likes him. Nobody even wants to pass the time of day with such an awkward bastard. Poor Mr. Tami is getting it in the neck from all and sundry." Shifting my gaze from the section filled with filthy rainwater, I now concentrate upon the section filled with limey goo. It proves to be packed with people. Indeed, it would be more exact to describe that it's containing hot water between men rather than containing men in its hot water. All the creatures here are moreover quite remarkably lethargic. For quite some time man has been climbing in and no one has quite climbed out yet. One cannot wonder that water gets fouled when so many people use it and a whole week trundles by before the water changed. Duly impressed by the turmoil in that tub, I peered more deeply among its tight-squeezed monsters, and there I found my wretched master cowering in the left corner, squashed and parboiled poppy red. Poor old thing. Someone ought to make a gap and let him scramble out, but no one seems willing to budge an inch, and, indeed, my master himself seems perfectly happy to stay where he is. He simply stands there motionless as his skin climbs through the gradations of red to vile vermilion. What a ghastly ordeal! I guess his readiness to suffer such dire reddening reflects a determination to extract 2 full farthing worth in return for the bath-house fee. But devoted as I am to the dim monster of mine, I cannot sit here comfy on my ledge without worrying lest dizzied by steam, medicating chemicals, and he drown if he dallies any longer. As these thoughts drifted through my mind, the fellow floating next to my master frowns and then remarks, "All the same, this is a bit too strong. It's boiling up, really scorching, from somewhere here behind me," I deduce, reluctant to come out with a flat complaint which might impugn his manliness. He is trying indirectly to rouse the sympathy of his boiling fellow monster. Oh no, this is just about right. Any cooler a medicinal bath has no effect at all. Back where I am come from, we take them twice as hot as this. Some braggart speaks from the depth of the swirling steam. Anyway, what the hell kind of good can these baths do? Enquired another monster who has covered his knobby head with a neatly folded hand towel. "It's good for all sorts of things. They say it's good for everything. In fact, it's terrific," replies a man with a face who could mistake as much by reason of its color of its shape for a haggard cucumber. I thought to myself that these slimy waves are truly so if these slimy waves were truly so effective, he ought to at least look a little more plump, a little bit more on the firm side of the vine. I always say on the first day when they put the medicine in, it's not best it's not the best for results. One needs to wait until the third day, even the fourth. Today, for instance, everything is just about right. This knowing comment, accompanied by an equally knowing look, came from a fattish man. Perhaps his chubbiness is really no more than layers of dirt deposited by the water. Would it, do you think, be good to drink?" asks a high-pitched, querulous voice, which quavers from somewhere unidentifiable. "If you feel a cold coming, down a mugful just before going to bed. If you do that, you won't need to wake up in the night to go for a pee. It's quite extraordinary. You ought to try it." Again, I cannot tell from which of the steam-wreathed faces this wisdom bubbled out. Turning my gaze from the baths, I stare down at the dark spots on the bathhouse floor where rows of naked men are sitting and sprawling in ugly disarray. Each adopts the posture that best suits him for scrubbing away at whichsoever portion of his body occupies his attention. Among these seriously contorted nudists, two attracts my most astonished stare. One, flat on his back, gawping at the skylight; the other, flat on his stomach, is peering down at the drain hole on the floor. Their utter self-abandonment, the totality of their idleness, is somehow deeply impressive. In another part of the forest, as Shakespeare pleasantly put it, a man with a shaven head squats down with his face to the stone of the wall, while a younger, smaller man, also shaven-pated, stands behind him pounding away at his shoulders. They seem to have some kind of a master-pupil relationship. The pupil type is busy playing the part of an unpaid bath attendant. There is, of course, a genuine bath attendant also somewhere in the scene. He is in fact not giving anyone a massage, but merely tilting heated water out of an oblong pail over the shoulder of a seated patron. He looks as though he must have caught a cold despite the fearful hotness of the place. He's wearing some sort of padded sleeveless vest. I notice that by crooking at his right big toe, his foot is gripped on a camlet rag. My glance drifts away to the light upon the selfish monster hoarding no less than 3 wash pails for himself. Oddly enough, he keeps pressing his neighbor to make use of his soap, perhaps in order to inflict upon that defenseless creature a long, slightly loony flow of talk. I strain my ears to catch the conversation, which in truth, a monologue. One moment, please. Hydration, hydration. Okay, sorry. A gun is an important thing, something foreign, not something Japanese. In the good old days, it was a matter of sword against sword. But foreigners are cowards, so they dreamt up something as dastardly as like guns. They don't come from China though. Long range fighting guns. Long range fighting with guns is what you would expect from one of those Western countries. There weren't any guns in the days of Koxinga, who, for all his Chinese name, was descended from the Emperor Seiwa through the Minamoto line. Yoshitsune, the best of the Minamotos, was not killed when they say he was. No, indeed. Instead, he fled from Hokkaido to Manchuria, and taking with him a Hokkaido man especially good at giving advice than Yoshine-san, calling himself a Manchurian, attacked the Emperor of China, and the great Ming was flat flummoxed. So what did he do? He sent a messenger to the third Tokugawa shogun, begging for the loan of 3,000 soldiers. But the shogun kept the messenger waiting in Japan for 2 whole years. I can't remember the messenger's name, but he had a name or other. In the end, shogun sent him down to Nagasaki, where he got mixed up with a prostitute. She then had a son, and that son is Koxinga. Of course, when the messenger at last got home to China, he found that the emperor of the Ming has been destroyed by the traitors. I can't make head or tails of this amazing rigmarole. It sounds totally barmy, so crazed, a mixture of garbled legends and historical untruth, that my attention again drifts away to focus on a gloomy looking fellow, maybe 25 or 26 years old, who appears to be steaming his crotch in the medicated water. He wears a vacant expression, seems to be suffering from swelling or something. The very young man of 17 or 18 who sits beside him, talking in an affected manner, is presumably some houseboy from the neighborhood. Next to his mincing Next to this mincing youth, I see an odd-looking back. Each joint in his spine sticks jaggedly out as though a knotted bamboo rod had been rammed up under his skin from somewhere down the buttocks. On either side of his spine, perfectly aligned, are four black marks like peg holes on a picket board. All 8 places are inflamed, some of them oozing pus. Though I have described each thing as it appeared before my eyes, I now realize that there is still so much to write about. With my limited skill, I can never set down more than a fraction of totality. I was quietly flinching from the consequences of my own rash undertaking to describe each and every detail to the more spectacular features of a bathhouse when a bald-skulled oldster, maybe about 70 years old, dressed in a light blue cotton kimono, suddenly appeared at the entrance. This hairless apparition bowed reverentially to his drove of naked monsters and then addressed them with greatest fluency. "Good sirs," he says, "I thank you for your regular and daily visits to my humble establishment. Today it is beyond these friendly walls more than a little chilly, so I beg of you, take your time, both within and without my spotless bath, to warm yourself at comfortable leisure. Hey, you there in charge of the bath, make quite sure that the water is kept at precisely the proper temperature." To which the bath attendant briefly answers, "Right. Now, there's an amiable fellow," says the cracked historian of the doings of Kosinga, speaking admiringly at the aged proprietor. "To run this kind of business, you have to have his neck for it." I was so struck by the sudden appearance of this strange old man that I decided to discontinue my overall surveillance of the bathhouse scenes, while I concentrated upon a more particularized scanning of so rum an individual. As I watched him, the old man, catching sight of a child some 4 years old who has just finished bathing, extends a mottled hand, and in that wheedling voice with which the old present their false advances to the young, calls out, "Come over here, my master." The child, frightened by the trampled pudding of a face which the gaffer bent upon him, promptly began to scream. The old man looked surprised. "Why? Why are you crying? What's the matter?" "Frightened of the old man? Well, I never!" His voice showed that he was genuinely astonished, but soon giving up this coaxing as a bad job, he quickly switched his attention to the child's father. "Hello again, son. How are you? A bit cold today, eh? And what about the burglar who broke into the big shop round the corner? Must have been a fathead. He cut a square hole in the wooden side gate, but then can you believe it took off without nicking a thing. Must have seen a cop or a watchman, I suppose. But what a waste of effort, eh?" Still grinning at the idea of the burglar rash stupidity, he turns to someone else. "Isn't it cold, though? Perhaps being young, you don't yet feel how it bites. It seems to me that, unique in his antiquity, he is the only person in the building who feels the cold at all." Having been thus absorbed for several minutes in studying the old man's antics, I had virtually forgotten about all the other monsters, including my own master, who was presumably still wedged in his boiling corner. I was jerked from my absorption by a sudden loud shouting in the middle of the room. And who should be the source of it but Mr. Sneeze himself? That my master's voice should be over loud and disagreeably indistinct is nothing new, but I was a little surprised to hear it raised in this particular place. I guessed in a flash that his raucous yelping had been caused by a rush of blood to his noddle, consequences of his unwisely protracted immersion in the water heated up to cure all ills. Naturally, no one would object to such a hullabaloo, however raspingly unpleasant, as if were brought on by physical distress, but as grew obvious enough, my beloved master, far from being geyser dizzied out of his normal senses, was in fact very much his own true self when he started bawling in that thickly violent voice. For the cause of sorry for the cause of the very nasty uproar was a childish idiotic squabble for which he had started with some conceited pup, some totally insignificant houseboy. "Get away from here! Go on! Further off! You're splashing water into my pail!" His shouting scraped one's eardrums. One's attitude to such outbursts depends, of course, upon one's point of view. One could, for instance, as I had done, conclude that he had just gone potty with the heat. Another, perhaps one generous-minded person in 10,000 might see a parallel with the courageous tongue-lashing of Takayama's Hikokuro dared to inflict upon a bandit. For all I know, that may be precisely how my master saw himself, but since the houseboy clearly does not see himself in the bandit's role, we are unlikely to witness a successful repetition of that historic encounter. "I was sitting here long before you came and you plumped yourself down." The boy's reply, calmly delivered over his shoulder, was not unreasonable. But since that answer made it clear that the lad was not prepared to budge, it did not please my master. My master, even though his blood was up, must have realized that neither the word nor the style of the delivery could really be picked upon as those of a bandit, but his howling outburst was not in fact occasioned by the boy's propinquity or any splashing of water. The truth was that for some considerable time, the boy and his equally young companion had been swapping remarks in a pertly unpleasing manner utterly inappropriate for their age. My master had endured their prattle for as long as he could, more and more exasperated, had finally blown up. Consequently, even though he had been perfectly civilly answered, the real cause of his fury remained unsoothed, and he could not bring himself to leave the place without his last explosion of his heart. "Hobbledehoys! Damn young idiots! Splashing your dirty water in other people's pails!" In my own heart I felt considerable sympathy for my master, because I, too, had found the boy's behaviour actively distasteful. Nevertheless, I was bound to regard my master's behaviour during this incident as conduct unbecoming in a teacher. The trouble is that he is by nature something of a dry old stick, far too strict and far too rigid. Not only he is as rough and desiccated as a lump of coke, but he is also cinder hard. I am told that years ago, when Hannibal was crossing the Alps, the advance of his army was impeded by a gigantic rock, inconveniently blocking the mountain path. Hannibal is said to have soused the stone with vinegar and then have it lit a bonfire underneath it. The rock thus softened, he saw it into segments, like someone slicing a fish paste, and so passed all his army safely on its way. A man like my master, on whom no effect whatsoever produced by hours of steady boiling in a medicated bath ought perhaps to be soused with vinegar and then grilled on an open fire. Failing some such treatment, his granitic obstinacy will not be softened though hordes of houseboys niggle away at the igneous rocks of his nature for 100,000 years. Though objects floating in the bath and lazing about on the bathroom floors are all monsters, terratoids dehumanized by the husking of their clothes. As such, they cannot be judged by normal civilized standards. In their, in their theoretical world, anyone can do what he likes. Anything can happen. A stomach can recite itself in pulmonary location. Kosinga can be blood-kin to Seiwa Minamoto's, and Mr. Tami, much aligned, may well be unreliable. But soon as those naked objects emerge from their bathhouse into the normal world, they garb themselves in obedience to the requirement of civilization, and once robed, they resume the nature and behavior patterns of human beings. My master stands on the threshold between two worlds. Standing as he does between the bathroom and the changing room, he is poised in the verge of his return to the worldliness, to the sad mundanities of man, to the suavities of compromise, the specious words, and the accommodating practices of his species in society. In on the verge of returning to that world, he yet maintains so brute an obstinacy. Surely his monk-like stubbornness must be deep-rooted disease, a disease indeed so firmly rooted as to be virtually ineradicable. In my humble opinion, there is only one cure for his condition, and that would be to get the principal of his school to give him the sack. My master, being unable to adapt himself to any changes of circumstances, would, if sacked, undoubtedly end up on the street, and if thus turned adrift, would equally, I certainly die in the gutter. In short, to sack him would to be kill him. My master loved being ill, but he would very much hate to die. He welters in the hypochondriacal orgies of self-pity, but lacks the strength of soul to seriously look on death. Consequently, if anyone scares him with the news of some continued illness must lead him to his demise, my craven master will immediately be both terrified out of his wits and, as I see it, terrified also into the best of health. Only the terror of death by dismissal can shrivel the roots of his most ineradicable stubbornness. And if dismissible doesn't do the work, well then, that I am afraid is that the poor old perisher will perish. Still, all in all, that foolish, fond old man, sick or well, remains my master. It was he who in my kittenhood took me in and fed me. I recall the tale of the Chinese poet who, given a meal when starving, later repaid the debt by saving his benefactor's life. I consider it should not be impossible for a cat at least to be moved by his master's fate. My soul brims with full pity, and I become so preoccupied with the internal spectacle of the generous working of my own deep-feeling heart that once again my attention wandered from the scene spread out below me. I sharply brought back into reality by a hubbub of abuse coming from the medicinal bath. Thinking that maybe another squabble has broken out, I shift my gaze to find the throng of monsters all shoving and shouting as they struggle to get out of the narrowed cleft of the adit to the bath. Horribly hairy legs and horrible hairless things are juxtaposed juxtaposed and tangled in horrible squirm to escape. It is early evening of an autumn day, and a red gold flattish light burns here and there upon the boiling steam which rises up to the ceiling. Through the hot foggy veils whose swirlings fill the room, I catch appalling glimpses of wild stampeding monsters. Their shrieks and bellows pierce my ears, and from all sides their agonized shouting that the bloody waters boiling mix in my skull, and as one loud howl of anguish, the shouts were multicolored, some yellow with sheer fear, some despairing blue, some furiously scarlet, some revengeful black. They split across each other, filling the bathroom with crashing columns of indescribable noise, and the din of pandemonium, such as have no context but hell and the public house. Fascinated by this true awful sight, I just stood there as though riveting to my ledge. The hideous roar climbed to a sort of blubbering climax where pleasure of mindless sound seemed just about to burst the walls apart, when from the swaying mass of tumbling naked bodies, a veritable giant lifted into view. He stands a good 3 inches taller than the tallest of his fellows. Not only that, but his reddish colored face is thickly bearded. The effect is so remarkable that one daren't affirm that the beard was actually growing on that face. It might that the face has somewhat got entangled in that beard. This apparition emits a booming sound, like a large cracked temple bell struck in the heat of noon. "Pour in the cold water, quick!" he thundered. "This bath is on the boil." Both voice and face towered above the squawking rabble around him, and for a moment a sort of silence reigned. The giant becomes the only person in the room, a Superman, a living embodiment of the Nietzsche's vision of Übermensch, the demon king among his swarm of devils, the master monster, Tyrannosaurus Rex. As soon as I stood goggling at him, someone beyond the bath answered through the sudden calm with a grunting of "Yah!" Assent? Derision? I shall never know. All I can say is that when I peered through the dark haze to identify the source of the ambiguous response, I could just make out the figure of the bathhouse attendant, padded, still in his sleeveless vest, using all his strength to heave a great lump of coal into the open lid of the furnace. The coal made a crackling sound, and the attendant's profile came radiantly alight. Behind his body the brick wall gleamed with fire, and the reflected glare burned at me with the darkness. Thoroughly alarmed, I read back from the window, and with one turning spring I hopped down and ran off home. But as I ran I pondered what I had seen, and the conclusion were clear. Although human creatures in the bathroom had been seeking monstrous equality by stripping off their clothes, even from the leveling stark nakedness, a hero had emerged to tower above his fellows. I did not know what happened to that hero, but I was certainly sure that equality is unachievable, however stark things may be. On reaching home, I find that all is peaceful. My master, his face still glowing from the bath, is quietly eating supper, but catching sight of me as I jump on the veranda, he breaks his silence to remark, "What a happy-go-lucky cat! I wonder what he has been up to, coming home as late as this." My master has little money, but I note that on the table tonight there are laden dishes for a three-course meal. Grilled fish will be one of them. I don't know what the fish is called, but I guess it was probably caught in the sea of Shinagawa sometime yesterday. I have already expatiated at length upon the natural healthiness of the fish as they fostered by their salt environment. However, once a fish has been caught and boiled, or like this one, grilled, questions of environmental advantage are just no longer relevant. This fish would have done so much better to stay alive in the sea, even if in the course of time it had eventually to suffer such ills as all fish flesh to ear to. So thinking, I sat myself down beside the table. I pretended not to look while looking in particular for a chance to snatch a piece of anything edible. Those who do not know how to look while not looking must give up any hope of ever eating good fish. My master pecked in silence at the fish, but soon put down his chopsticks. Sorry, just one moment. My master pecked in silence, but soon put down his chopsticks as if to say that he didn't much like the taste. His wife, seated directly opposite him in matching silence, is anxiously watching how his chopsticks move up and down and whether my master's jaws are opening or closing. I say, he suddenly asked her, give that cat a whack on the head. What happens if I whacked it? Never mind what happens, just whack it. Like this? Asked his wife, tapping my head with the palm of his hand. It didn't hurt at all. Well, look at that. It didn't even give at least a meow. No, she says, it didn't. Then whack it again. Good morning, Ragzin. It'll It'll be just the same however often I try. I gave me another tap on the head. Since I felt nothing, I naturally kept quiet. But what could be the point of these peculiar orders? As a prudent and intelligent cat, I find my master's behavior utterly incomprehensible. Any person who could understand what he's driving at would then know how to react, but it's not that easy. His wife is simply told to whack it, but she, the whacker, is self-statedly at loss to know why should she whack it. I, unfortunately, a wacky, am no less lost to understand what it's all about. My master is becoming a little edgily impatient, for twice already his instructions have failed to produce the result which he only knows that he desires. It is therefore almost sharply that he says, whack it so that it meows. His wife assumed a resigned sort of expression and wearily asking, why on earth should you want to make the wretched thing meow? Gave me another harder slap. Now that I know what he wants, it's all absurdly easy. I can satisfy my master with a mere meow. But it's really rather depressing. Not just to witness, but actually to participate in yet another demonstration of his adulterated conduct. If he wanted me to meow, he should have said so. His wife would have been spared two or three totally unnecessary effort, and I would not have needed to endure more than a single whack. An order to whack should only be given when only a whack is wanted, but in this case what was wanted was simply a meow. Now whacking may indeed fall within his sphere of responsibility, but meowing lies in mine. It's a damn impertinence that he should dare to assume that an instruction to whack includes, or implies an instruction to meow, which is a matter totally within my discretion. If he's taking my meows for granted, indeed he presumes too far. Such failure to respect another person's personality is deadly insult to any cat. It's the sort of crude insensitivity which one must expect from a creature like my master's own particular pet aversion, the nauseous Mr. Goldfield. But the same behavior on the part of my master, a man so confident in his open-heartedness that he struts about stark naked, one can only be seen as an act of unwanted weakness. Yet, as I know, my master is not mean, from which it follows that his venture into whacking was not motivated by any deviousness or malice. In my opinion, his orders were hatched in a brain as guileless and dim as that of a mosquito larva. If one gobbles rice, one's stomach becomes full. If one is cut, one bleeds. If one is killed, one dies. Therefore, such reasoning runs: if one just whacked, one must perforce meow. Though I have done my best to justify my master's way toward me, I regret to be bound to point out this clottish absurdity of such style of logic. But for if one were to concur in that logic, it would follow that if one falls into a river, one is required to drown, that if one eats fried fish, one must then get the squatters, that if one gets a salary, one must turn up for work, and if one studies books, one cannot fail to make oneself a great name in the world. And if that were the way things work, there would be some a bit embarrassed. I, for instance, would find it annoying to be obliged to meow and whack. What I ask would be the point of being born a cat. Like a bell clock at Mejiro, one is expected to give off sound every one time struck. Having thus mentally reprimanded my presumptuous master, then and then I obliged him with a mew. As soon as I meowed, my master turned to his wife. "Hear that?" he said. "Now tell me, is a meow an interjection or an adverb?" The question was so abrupt that Mrs. Nee said nothing. To tell the truth, my own immediate reaction was to think that, after all, he really had been driven out of his mind by his experience in the bath-house. He is, of course, well known in the neighborhood for his eccentricities. I have heard him called a clear case of neurosis. However, my master's self-conceit is so unshakable that he insists that, far from being a neurotic himself, it is his detractors in which neurotic tendencies are clear. When it when his neighbors call him dog, he calls them in mere fairness, so he puts it filthy pigs. He seems, indeed, besotted with maintaining his ideas of fairness to the point of being positive public nuisance. He sees nothing odd in asking questions as ludicrous as the last inquiry to his wife about the proper parsing of a cat's meow, but the general run of his listeners, his questions do suggest a certain mental instability. In any event, his wife, understandably mystified, makes no attempt to answer him. For obvious reasons, I too offer nothing in reply. My master waited for a moment, and then, in a loud voice, suddenly shouted, "Hey!" His wife looked up in surprise and answered, "Yes?" "Is that 'yes' an interjection or adverb? Tell me, what is it?" "Whichever it is, it surely doesn't matter." "What a silly thing to ask!" "On the contrary, it matters a very great deal. The grammatical problem is an issue currently preoccupying the best brain amongst the leading authorities in linguistics in Japan. Gracious me, you mean that our leading authorities are bending their brains to a cat's meow? What a dreadful state of affairs! Anyway, cats don't speak Japanese. Surely a meow is just a word from the language of cats. One moment, please. I need hydration. Back. That's precisely the point. The problem is a hard one in the very difficult field of comparative linguistics. Is that so? It's clear that she is sufficiently intelligent to be disinterested in such silly matters. Sorry, got interrupted again. And have these leading authorities yet discovered what part of speech compares with the cat's meow? It's so it's so serious a problem that it cannot immediately be resolved. He munches away at the fish and then proceeds to tuck into the next course of stewed pork and potatoes. This will be pork, won't it? Yes, it's pork. He grunted in a tone of deep disdain, and then guzzled it down. Thereafter, holding out a sake cup, I'll have another cup. You're drinking rather a lot today. You already look quite red. Certainly I'm drinking, he began, but broke off to veer away on a new mad tack. Do you know, he demanded, the longest word in the world? I think I've heard it somewhere. Let me think now. Yes, isn't it Hoshoji no Nyudo Saki no Kanpaku da Doji Daijin? No, I don't mean a title like that. Former chief advisor to the emperor and prime minister. I mean a true long word. Do you mean one of those crab written right sideways words from the west? Yes. Well then, no. That I wouldn't know. But I do know that you have had quite enough sake. You'll have some rice now, won't you? Right? Wrong? First, I'll drink more. Would you like to know what's the longest word? Alright, but after you have some rice? The word is akeo mel. Sorry, I'm gonna have a rough time with this one as well. Akeo mele sidono prunisterata. Oh my god. You made it up. Of course I didn't. It's Greek. What does it mean in Japanese? I don't know what it means. I only know its spelling. Even if written sparingly, it would cover about 6¼ inches. It's my master's singularity that he makes this sort of statement which most men would vouchsafe in their cups in dead cold sobriety. All the same, it's certainly true that he's drinking far too much tonight. He normally limits himself to no more than a couple cups of sake, and he's already tossed 4 back. His normal dosage turned his face quite red, so the double dosage has inevitably flushed his features to the color of red-hot tongs. He looks to be in some distress, but he keeps on knocking them back. He extends the cup again. One more, he says. His wife, finding this really too much, makes a wry face. Don't you think you have enough? You only get the pain. Never mind the pain. From now on, I'm going to train myself into a steady drinker. Oinachi Keigetsu has recommended that I devote myself to drink. And who may this Keigetsu be? Great and famous though he is, in the eyes of Mrs. Niece, he isn't worth a penny. Keigetsu is a literary colleague, a first-rated critic of this present time. He has advised me to spend less time at home communing with a cat, to get out and about, to drink on all occasions. Since he's almost a doctor, albeit one of literature, it would seem alright to drink on doctor's orders. Don't be ridiculous. I don't care what he's called or who he is. It's none of his business to urge other people to drink, especially who happens to have weak stomachs. He didn't just recommend drinking. He said I ought to be more sociable, take a fling at the fast life, wine, women, song, even travel. Are you trying to tell me that this so-called first-class critic has been making such outrageous suggestions? What kind of a man can he be? Truly, I'm shocked to learn that presumably responsible literary figures would recommend that a married man should go out on the loose. There's nothing wrong with living it up. If I had the money, I wouldn't need Keigetsu encouragement before giving it a try. Well then, I'm very glad that you don't have the money. It would be quite awful if a man your age started gallivanting about with wanton girls and drunken half-wit critics. Since the idea seems to shock you, I'll scrap my plans for kicking over the traces. However, in consideration that the connubial self-sacrifice, you'll have to take better care of your husband, and in particular serve him better dinners. I'm already doing the best that I can on what you give me. Really? Well, in that case, I'll postpone my investigation of the fast life until I can afford it, and for tonight I won't take more sake. With what might just pass for a smile, he held out his rice bowl for his wife to fill from the container. As I remember it, he thereupon got through 3 great bowlfuls of mixed rice and tea. My meal that night consisted of 3 slices of pork and the grilled head of that nameless fish. And, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of chapter 4. Oh, sorry. Not cry, but bow. That is the end of chapter 4, volume 2 of I Am a Cat by Natsume Sōseki. And sorry. We will be continuing basically volume 3 chapter 1. Guess what? Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. once again. Thank you so much for staying with me. This stream went on for I think almost 3 hours. It got cut off in the middle. I think it's terrible. It's so sad. But yes, it's a pretty long chapter. Chapter 4 is a pretty long chapter, definitely. But thank you so much for being here with me, and also to those listening on the stream. Thank you for staying with me all the time for this entire time, for this whole chapter. It's a pretty long chapter, and I'm very sorry I stuttered quite a bit, and I got interrupted multiple times. It's very unfortunate. It's not the best stream so far, and not the best reading so far. I definitely feel that way. But I'm really happy that all of you are here with me, and thank you for being here. I truly appreciate it, and I shall I'll end my stream soon. But yes, remember, the next reading will be tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. GMT plus 8. We will be continuing I Am a Cat by Natsume Sōseki, the start of Volume 3, Chapter 1. Thank you so much for staying with me. I hope you guys will have a wonderful, 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 and beautiful, and amazing, and smooth Friday afternoon and evening. Have lots of fun and have a great day in general. Thank you so much. And I will end my stream now with a bit of goodbye. And I shall see you guys soon. Thank you so much for staying with me, you guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Uh, it's my throat hurts kind of because I think I forgot to hydrate for a few times. But yes, thank you so much for being here. I'll see you guys maybe later or tomorrow. Most probably tomorrow. Goodbye. Have a nice day.